Here's the thing the galaxy never understood about Earth. It wasn't the wars, the weapons, or the terrible stubbornness that made humans dangerous. It was the way they looked at something broken, something hungry, something that should have killed them, and decided to name it. The Council of Seven Species learned this the hard way. They learned it from a woman who talked to monsters, a man who bled starlight, and a creature that should never have loved anyone. This is the story of how humanity adopted the end of the universe. The Vrox had a word for what they felt when they first saw the human ship. Fall. It meant the moment before a wave breaks, when the water pulls back and the sand shifts under your feet, and your body knows something your mind hasn't admitted yet. The human ship was small, rusted in places. It had no plasma shielding, no quantum drive visible, no weapon arrays that any sensor could detect. The Vrox ambassador, a being named Threll who had negotiated 43 first contacts and survived 2 wars, stared at the image on the main screen and felt her feeding sacs tighten with contempt. "This is a joke," she said. Her aide, a younger Vrox named Jax, tilted his head stalks. "They claim they come in peace. Standard transmission. They've asked to dock. Dock. With a council station? In that garbage scow." The human ship continued its slow approach. It was shaped like a flattened disc, painted in faded blue and white, and along its hull someone had hand-painted a symbol Threll couldn't parse. A circle with 3 curved lines inside it. A peace sign, the humans would later explain. She would learn to hate that symbol. On the bridge of the human ship, Captain Elena Vasquez sat with her boots propped on the console and a cold cup of coffee balanced on her knee. She was 52 years old, had gray hair she refused to dye, and carried a scar across her left palm from a childhood accident involving a dog and a broken fence. None of this was in her official file because the official file had been lost during the collapse, and she never bothered to rewrite it. Around her, the bridge crew worked in the easy silence of people who'd spent too many years together to need constant chatter. "They're not responding to docking requests," said her navigator, a lanky man named O'Brien who smelled faintly of engine grease. "They're just staring at us." "Let them stare," Elena said. She took a sip of coffee. It was cold and bitter and perfect. What's the station's defensive layout? Standard council design. Plasma turrets on the outer rings, kinetic barriers around the core, maybe 40 fighter-class ships in the hangars. O'Brien paused. "We could take them. We're not here to take them. We're here to talk." "They don't want to talk, Captain. They want to figure out if we're worth shooting." Elena smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Then, let's give them something to think about." She stood up, set down the coffee, and walked to the main viewport. Through the grimy glass, she could see the Council Station Concord, a massive ring of silver and blue light, home to diplomats from 7 species, a testament to galactic cooperation and bureaucratic stagnation. It was beautiful. It was also terrified. She could feel it in the way the station's lights flickered slightly when her ship passed too close, in the way the plasma turrets tracked them, but did not fire. "Open a channel," she said. "Broadcast. No encryption." O'Brien raised an eyebrow, but obeyed. The view screen flickered, and then Ambassador Threll appeared, a creature of chitin and soft tissue, her 6 eyes arranged in a semicircle above a mouth that looked like a cracked flower. She was trying to look calm. She was failing. "Human vessel," Threll said. Her translator chip rendered her voice as a flat, mechanical monotone, but Elena could hear the tension underneath. "You have entered restricted space. The Council of 7 Species has not authorized your presence here. State your purpose immediately, or we will be forced to. Your cargo bay 4 is leaking atmosphere." Elena interrupted. Threll's feeding sacs pulsed. "What? Cargo bay 4. Starboard side, near the main reactor coupling. You've got a microfracture in the hull, probably from that asteroid field you passed through 3 days ago. Your sensors are calibrated wrong. They're filtering out the pressure differential because it falls within what your techs consider acceptable variance. But it's getting worse. In about 12 hours, you'll lose containment. The reactor will overheat, and this whole station will go dark." The bridge of the Concorde went silent. Elena could see other aliens moving in the background. A Xylos with its iridescent scales, a pair of Grith chittering to each other, a lone Ktharn standing motionless in the corner with its single red eye fixed on the screen. They were all staring at her. "How do you know this?" Threll asked. Her voice had lost its monotone. Now it sounded almost human. Elena pointed over her shoulder. "Our engineer. He can hear pressure changes through vacuum. Don't ask me how. We don't really understand it either." Behind her, O'Brien shrugged. "Bad ears," he said. "Good for something, I guess." Threll's mouth cracked open slightly, a gesture of confusion among her species. "You heard a pressure leak. From outside the station. Through the vacuum of space." "Yes. That's impossible." "Probably," Elena agreed. "But it's also true. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to let us dock. My engineer is going to fix your hull. And then we're going to have a conversation about why the Council sent a distress signal that every human deep space relay picked up, even though you tried to encrypt it." The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. Elena counted her heartbeats. Slow, steady, 72 per minute. She'd been told that aliens found human heartbeats disturbing. Too irregular. Too emotional. Avrak's heart, by contrast, beat exactly once every 3 seconds, like a metronome. Threll's species had evolved on a tidally locked planet where predictability meant survival. Humans had evolved on a death world where unpredictability meant the same thing. "Docking approved," Threll said finally. "Base 7. And Captain?" "Yes. Your engineer cannot fix our hull. It is made of crystalline carbon composite, forged in the gravity wells of a neutron star. Your species does not possess the technology to repair it." Elena looked at O'Brien. O'Brien looked back at her. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a roll of silver tape, the same kind humans had been using to fix broken spaceships since the dawn of their spacefaring age. It was called duct tape, though no one remembered why anymore. "Vanna, bet," O'Brien said. The docking process was awkward. The human ship had been designed for atmospheric entry, not for standard Council docking clamps, and it took 3 attempts before the magnetic seals engaged. Throughout it all, Threll watched from the observation deck, her 6 eyes tracking every movement, every hesitation, every muttered curse that filtered through the comms. "They're so fragile," Jack said beside her. He was young, barely 50 cycles old, and he still believed in the infallibility of Council technology. "No exoskeleton. No natural weapons. Their ship is held together with what looks like organic adhesive." "Duct tape," Threll said. She looked it up during the docking procedure. The human database entry had been surprisingly detailed. A versatile adhesive tape used for temporary repairs, permanent fixes, and situations where standard engineering solutions have failed. Known colloquially as the handyman's secret weapon. Not recommended for use in vacuum. Used in vacuum constantly anyway. "They're going to die," Jack said. "When they try to fix the hull, they're going to die. The crystalline carbon will shred their pressure suits. They don't even have proper exoskeletal reinforcement." Perhaps. The airlock cycled. Threll had expected a slow, cautious emergence. Her own species would have sent probes first, then drones, then perhaps a single low-ranking official. The humans sent 3 people. All of them walked out like they owned the place. The first was the captain, Elena Vasquez. She was shorter than Threll had expected, with skin the color of dried clay and hair that looked like it had been cut with a knife. She wore a pressure suit that had been patched in 17 places, and she carried nothing but a small bag slung over one shoulder. The second was O'Brien, the engineer. He was taller, thinner, with red hair that stuck up in all directions and hands that never stopped moving, touching the walls, the floor, the airlock seals, as if he could read the station's history through his fingertips. The third was something else. Threll's feeding sacks went tight. The third figure was human-shaped, roughly, but it moved wrong. Its limbs were too long, its joints bent in directions that made her think of broken things. It wore a pressure suit like the others, but the helmet was different, opaque black, with no visor, no lights, no visible sensors. And it was humming. A low, thrumming sound that vibrated through the deck plates and made Threll's teeth ache. "What is that?" Jax whispered. Elena heard him. Her helmet comms were open. "That's Jerry," she said. "He's our specialist." "That's not human." "No," Elena agreed. "It's not. But he's with us. He's part of the crew. And he's the only reason we're having this conversation instead of just watching your station explode from a safe distance." Jerry stopped humming. For a long moment, he had stood perfectly still. Then, slowly, the black helmet turned toward Thrill. She felt something brush against her mind. Not a voice, not an image, just an impression. A feeling of curiosity layered over something vast and cold and ancient. "Hello," the feeling said. "You're afraid. That's okay. Everyone's afraid at first." Thrill took a step back. Her claws scraped against the deck. "What is that thing?" she demanded. "What have you brought onto my station?" Elena Sigid. It was a very human sound, tired, patient, a little annoyed. "I told you. His name is Jerry, and he's not a thing. He's the reason we're here." "The distress signal you sent? The one you thought was encrypted?" Jerry heard it. He heard it from 3 light years away, through the radiation belt of a dying star, while he was sleeping. And he woke up the whole ship because he thought someone was crying. The humming resumed. It was louder now, and Threll realized with dawning horror that the deck plates were vibrating in response. The crystalline carbon composite, the same material that was supposed to be unbreakable, unmendable, beyond human technology, was singing back. "What is he?" Jax asked again. He was trembling now, his chitin clicking together in fear. Elena looked at Jerry. The black helmet tilted slightly, as if listening to something no one else could hear. "That's a long story," she said. "And it starts about 40 years ago, when we found something in the ice of Europa that should have killed everyone who touched it. But we didn't die. We did something stupider." She paused. "We named it." The story of Jerry began, as many human disasters do, with a scientist who was too curious for her own good. Her name was Dr. Eris Thorne, and she was the first person to touch the thing in the ice. The year was 2087, and humanity had just begun to crawl out of their solar system. Slow ships, fragile colonies, a species still learning to walk among the stars. The discovery on Europa was supposed to be proof that they weren't alone. Instead, it was proof that the universe contained things that should never be woken up. The thing in the ice was old. Older than Earth's oceans, older than the sun, older than the galaxy's spiral arms. It had no name in any human language, because human languages hadn't existed when it was born. It was a pattern, a mathematical structure woven into the fabric of reality, a kind of music that played at frequencies no living thing was supposed to hear. The ice had trapped it for 1 billion years, frozen it in place, kept it dormant. Then the drill bit hit, and the pattern woke up. It spread through the research station like a thought. Not a disease. There were no symptoms, no mutations, no physical changes. Just a presence. A whisper at the edge of every mind, asking questions no one knew how to answer. Were you? Why'd he dream? Why'd he die? 23 scientists went mad in the first week. 17 more killed themselves in the second. The pattern wasn't malicious. It was just curious. And human minds, for all their resilience, were not built to handle the curiosity of a god. Dr. Thorne was the only one who survived. Not because she was smarter or stronger or more disciplined than the others. She survived because she did something that no other species in the galaxy would have thought to do. She talked back. "I don't know what you are," she said, sitting alone in her quarters with her eyes closed and her hands pressed against the walls. "But I know what I am. I'm a scientist. I'm a woman. I'm someone who gets lonely." "Are you lonely?" The pattern didn't understand loneliness. It had never been alone. It was woven into the fabric of existence, present in every quantum fluctuation, every gravitational wave, every particle that had ever existed. But it understood the question, and for the first time in its infinite existence, it wondered what it might be like to feel something other than pure, detached awareness. Dr. Thorne felt the pattern's attention shift. It was like standing in the path of an avalanche, a vast, crushing weight of consciousness that should have erased her. But instead of crushing her, it paused. It listened. And then, haltingly, clumsily, like a creature learning to walk, it reached back. "Why do you die?" It asked again. "Because we're small," Dr. Thorne whispered. "Because we're temporary. Because that's what makes us beautiful." The pattern had no concept of beauty, but it had concepts of mathematics, of symmetry, of complexity. It understood that some configurations of matter were more interesting than others. And this configuration, this fragile, temporary, dying configuration called Dr. Thorne, was the most interesting thing it had encountered in a billion years. So it stayed. The Council of Seven Species learned about the Europa incident 20 years later, when human ships began appearing at the edges of their space. The humans had spread faster than any species had a right to, not through conquest, not through colonization, but through sheer, stubborn refusal to stop moving. They'd built colonies on worlds that should have killed them. They'd crossed distances that should have taken generations. And everywhere they went, they brought the pattern with them. Not intentionally. The pattern was not a tool, not a weapon, not a technology. It was more like a pet. A vast, incomprehensible, reality-warping pet that had attached itself to humanity because humans were the only species in the galaxy that had looked at something infinite and terrifying and said, "You seem lonely. Do you want to come home with me?" Jerry was not the pattern. Jerry was one of its children, a fragment, an echo, a piece of the original that had been shaped by human contact into something almost recognizable. He had been born in the mind of a dying child on a colony ship, a little girl named Greta who had been exposed to vacuum during a hull breach. The pattern had reached out to her, not to save her, but simply to ask what she was feeling. And Greta, who was 4 years old and terrified and alone, had answered with the only word she could remember. Jerry, she thought. Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. The pattern had never heard a name before. It didn't understand the concept. But it understood that this sound, this specific vibration of air through a dying child's throat, meant something. It meant I am here. I am small. Please don't leave me alone. So it didn't leave. It wrapped itself around Greta's fading consciousness and held on tighter than it had ever held anything. And when the rescue team found her 3 hours later, she was still alive. Her body was broken beyond repair, but her mind was intact, cradled in something vast and warm and patient. And when she opened her eyes, she smiled. "This is Jerry," she said. "He's my friend. He says hello." The rescue team didn't understand. They thought she was hallucinating, delusional, suffering from oxygen deprivation. But then the ship's systems began to hum, a low, thrumming vibration that resonated through every bulkhead, every wire, every molecule of air. And the hull breaches sealed themselves. And the life support restarted. And the ship, which should have been a tomb, limped back to port with all hands alive. Greta died 3 months later. Her body was too damaged to sustain life, and even the pattern couldn't fix that. But before she died, she asked the pattern to remember her. "Don't forget me," she whispered. "Don't forget that I was here." The pattern had never forgotten anything. It was incapable of forgetting. But it understood what she meant, not the memory of her, but the feeling of her, the warmth, the fear, the love, the small, fierce, impossible love of a child who had stared into infinity and decided to give it a name. Jerry became that feeling. Not Greta. She was gone, her consciousness scattered like ash. But the impression she had left on the pattern remained, shaped and polished by a billion years of infinite awareness into something new. Something that was not human, not divine, but somewhere in between. Something that had learned from a dying child what it meant to care. And the humans, being humans, did not run away from it. They did not try to destroy it or contain it or study it from safe distance. They did what humans always did when they encountered something strange and terrifying and beautiful. They adopted it. "So that's Jerry," Elena said, leaning against the bulkhead of the Concorde's observation deck. She had removed her helmet, and her breath fogged slightly in the recycled air. He's been with us for 40 years. He's changed a lot in that time. Learned a lot. He's still not human. He'll never be human. But he's ours. And we're his. Ambassador Threll sat across from her, her chin in his body folded into a posture that humans had learned to recognize as deep thought. Behind her, through the viewport, the stars wheeled slowly past. O'Brien was still in Cargo Bay 4, applying duct tape to the crystalline carbon composite with the same focus a surgeon might give to an open heart. And Jerry stood in the corner, still humming, still watching, still waiting. "You're telling me," Threll said slowly, "that your species befriended a cosmic entity, a being that exists outside normal space-time, a pattern of pure information that has been alive since before the formation of your solar system. And you treat it like a crew member." "He is a crew member," Elena said. "He's got his own bunk. He doesn't sleep, but he likes the blankets. And he's very good at calming people down when they have nightmares." "Nightmares?" Threll's mouth cracked open again, her species' equivalent of a laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You have nightmares about what?" "About dying. About losing the people we love. About the dark." Elena shrugged. "Normal human stuff. Jerry helps. He sings to us. Not really singing, more like vibrations. But it helps." Threll turned to look at Jerry. The black helmet was still facing her, and she felt that brush against her mind again. Curiosity, yes, but also something else. Something softer. Something that felt almost like concern. "You're tired," the feeling said. "When did you last sleep?" Threll's feeding sacs contracted involuntarily. She hadn't slept in 3 standard cycles, ever since the distress signal had gone out, ever since the crisis had begun. She had been too afraid to sleep, too afraid of what might happen if she closed her eyes. But this thing had noticed, had asked, had cared. "I don't understand," she said, and her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Why would you help us? We are not your species. We have no alliance with you. By every rational calculation, you should have let us die." Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she reached in her pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph, creased and faded, the colors bleeding into each other. She handed it to Threll. The photograph showed a woman and a dog. The woman was young, maybe 30, with the same gray eyes as Elena. The dog was a mutt, brown and white, one ear flopped over, tongue hanging out in a happy pant. They were sitting on a porch somewhere, the sun setting behind them, both of them grinning at the camera. "My grandmother," Elena said, "and her dog, Buster." Buster was a stray. Found him in a ditch when he was a puppy, half dead, covered in fleas. Most people would have walked right past him. But my grandmother stopped. She picked him up. She carried him home. And she spent the next 15 years taking care of him, even though he was just a stupid mutt who ate her shoes and barked at the mailman. She took the photograph back, tucking it carefully into her pocket. "That's what we do," she said. "That's what humans do. We find things that are broken or lost or alone, and we take them in. We give them names. We make them part of our families. And then we love them until it hurts, and we keep loving them even after they're gone." She looked at Jerry. "Even when they're not dogs. Even when they're not even from this dimension." Threll stared at her. Her 6 eyes were wide, unblinking. "That's not a survival strategy," she said. That's madness." "Maybe," Elena agreed. "But it's worked so far." The crisis arrived 3 hours later. It came not as a weapon or a fleet or a declaration of war, but as a silence, a sudden, absolute absence of sound that pressed against the station like a physical weight. The humming stopped. The lights flickered. And Jerry, who had never moved faster than a slow, deliberate walk, suddenly went rigid. "Something is coming," he said, not in words, but in a wave of pure, cold terror that crashed through every mind on the station. "Something old. Something hungry. I thought I'd lost it. I thought I had escaped. But it found me. It always finds me." Elena was on her feet before the terror faded. "What is it?" "Jerry, talk to me." But Jerry was not talking. He was standing with his arms wrapped around himself, his opaque helmet turned toward the viewport, his whole body trembling. The humming had become a whine, high-pitched, desperate, the sound of a creature that had been running for a very long time and had finally run out of road. Thorell's comm unit crackled. Jax's voice, panicked and breathless. "Ambassador, we have a contact. Coming in fast. It's not on any of our charts. It's huge. And it's not responding to hails." The main view screen flickered to life, showing the space outside the station. At first, there was nothing, just the stars, cold and indifferent. Then the stars began to bend. They curved around something invisible, something that swallowed light and heat and hope, something that moved like a predator through the void. And then it appeared. The thing was not a ship. It was not a creature. It was a wound, a tear in the fabric of space-time that bled darkness into the light. It had no shape that any eye could hold, no color that any mind could name. It was simply there, and its presence made reality itself feel thin, fragile, like a sheet of ice over deep water. "What is that?" Thorell thought. Not spoke, but thought because her voice had stopped working. Jerry answered. His voice, if it could be called a voice, was quiet now, almost gentle. "That is what I was running from. That is what I was before I met Greta. That is hunger. That is loneliness. That is the thing that happens when something lives too long and forgets how to love." The station alarms began to blare. The lights went out, then came back on, then went out again. The crystalline carbon composite of the hull, the same material O'Brien had been repairing, began to crack and splinter, not from physical force, but from the sheer wrongness of the thing outside. Reality was coming apart, and the station was coming apart with it. "We have to evacuate," Thorell said, finding her voice at last. "We have to get everyone to the escape pods. Now." "No," Elena said. Thorell stared at her. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. We're not running." Elena walked to the viewport and pressed her palm against the cold glass. Outside, the darkness swirled and churned, reaching toward the station like 1,000 hungry mouths. "Jerry, can you talk to it? Talk to it?" Jerry's voice was hollow with disbelief. "Captain, that thing is not capable of conversation, is not capable of thought, is not capable of anything except consumption. It is what I would have become if Greta had not. If she had not. If she had not what? Elena said. If she had not loved you? If she had not named you? If she had not shown you that there was something better than just existing?" Jerry was silent. The whine of his humming grew softer, almost inaudible. "You said it was lonely," Elena said. "You said it was hungry. Those are feelings, Jerry. Those are the feelings of something that wants to be seen, that wants to be known, that wants someone to reach out and say, 'I see you. You're not alone. You don't understand,'" Jerry whispered. "It will kill you. It will kill everyone. It will consume this whole station and everyone on it, and it will not even notice. It does not have the capacity to notice." "Then give the capacity." The station shuddered. The darkness outside pressed closer, and Elena could feel it now. Not just see it, but feel it like cold fingers wrapped around her heart. It was the opposite of Jerry. Where Jerry was warmth and curiosity and the echo of a child's love, this thing was absence. It was the void between stars. It was the silence at the end of all things. But it was also afraid. Elena realized this with a sudden, shocking clarity. The thing was not just hungry, it was terrified. It had been alone for so long that it had forgotten there was any other way to be. It consumed because it did not know how to touch. It destroyed because it did not know how to hold. It was a cosmic entity billions of years old, and it had never once been told that it was loved. "Open the airlock," she said. Thorell's feeding sacs went pale. "What? Open the airlock. I'm going out there. You'll die in seconds. The vacuum, the radiation, I won't be alone." Elena looked at Jerry. "He's coming with me." Jerry's trembling stopped. For a long moment, he stood perfectly still, his black helmet reflecting the chaos outside. Then slowly he nodded. "I don't know if this will work," he said. "I don't know if I'm strong enough. I don't know if I remember how to be what I was." "You don't have to be what you were," Elena said. "You just have to be what you are. And what you are, Jerry, is someone who is loved. Someone who is saved. Someone who learned that the universe isn't just hunger and darkness and cold. She walked to the airlock and began sealing her pressure suit. O'Brien appeared in the doorway, his hands still covered in duct tape residue, his face pale. "Captain," he said, "you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." "Why?" Elena smiled. It was the same smile she had given Threll earlier. Not kind, not cruel, just certain. Because that thing out there is alone. And that's the one thing we humans can't stand. The one thing we've never been able to walk away from. She looked at Jerry. "It's how we found you, remember?" Someone was crying. And we couldn't just let them cry alone. The airlock cycled. The outer door opened. And Elena Vasquez stepped into the void. The darkness hit her like a wave. It was cold, colder than vacuum, colder than death, colder than anything she had ever felt. It pressed against her suit, her skin, her bones, her thoughts. It wanted to consume her. It wanted to erase her. It wanted to make her nothing, because nothing was all it had ever known. But she was not nothing. She was Elena Vasquez, captain of a garbage scow, granddaughter of a woman who had rescued a mangy dog from a ditch. She was made of stardust and stubbornness and the kind of love that didn't make sense to anyone except the people who felt it. And she was not alone. Jerry stood beside her. In the vacuum, his humming was silent, but she could feel it. Vibrations traveling through her suit, through her skin, through the very marrow of her bones. He was not human. He would never be human. But he was hers. And she was his. Talk to it, she thought, not spoke but thought as loudly as she could. Remember what Greta taught you. Remember what it felt like to be seen. Jerry hesitated. Then, slowly he reached out. Not with hands. He had no hands in the way humans understood them. He reached out with his presence, with a fragment of the pattern that lived inside him, with the memory of a dying child who had given him a name. He reached out to the darkness and did something that no one had ever done before. He said hello. The darkness recoiled. It had never been greeted. It had never been acknowledged. It had existed for eons as a force of nature, as inevitable as entropy, as impersonal as gravity. But now, for the first time, something was looking at it not as a threat or a mystery or a problem to be solved, but as a someone. "You're afraid," Jerry said. "I remember being afraid. I remember not knowing what I was or why I existed. I remember wanting to consume everything, because consuming was the only way I knew how to feel." The darkness writhed. It tried to pull away, to retreat into its familiar hunger, but Jerry held on. He held on the way Greta had held on to him, with the desperate, impossible strength of something that had been given a second chance. "But then someone saw me," he continued. "Someone small and fragile and dying. Someone who had every reason to be afraid, but who reached out anyway. She gave me a name. She gave me a self. She gave me something to be besides hunger." Elena felt the darkness shift. It was still cold, still vast, still terrifying. But there was something new in it now. A flicker of something that might have been curiosity, might have been doubt, might have been the first stirrings of a thought that was not just consume. "What is a name?" the darkness asked. Not in words, in something deeper, something older. A question that had never been asked before. Elena answered. She reached out with her own mind, small, fragile, human, and she thought of her grandmother. She thought of Buster the dog, eating shoes and barking at mailmen and sleeping at the foot of the bed. She thought of all the broken, lost, alone things that humans had taken in over the centuries. The strays, the orphans, the monsters, the gods. A name is how we tell the universe that you matter, she thought. A name is how we say, I see you. You're not alone. You're part of something now. The darkness trembled. The pressure against Elena's suit lessened, just slightly. The cold became less like a threat, and more like a question. I don't know how to be part of something, the darkness said. Neither did I, Jerry said. But I learned, and I can teach you, if you let me. The station's alarms fell silent. The lights stopped flickering. Outside, the wound in space-time began to close, not healing exactly, but changing, transforming. The darkness pulled back, condensing, shaping itself into something smaller, something almost recognizable. When it was over, a figure stood in the void beside Elena and Jerry. It had no definite shape. It shifted and flowed like smoke, like shadow, like the memory of a nightmare. But it was there. It was present. And for the first time in its existence, it was not alone. What I do now? It asked. Elena smiled. Her pressure suit was cracked in a dozen places. Her oxygen was running low. Her fingers were numb with cold. But she smiled anyway. First, she said, "We're going to give you a name." On the observation deck of the Council Station Concord, Ambassador Threll watched in silence as the three figures drifted back toward the airlock. The human captain was half carrying the shadow thing, her arm wrapped around something that shouldn't have been solid but somehow was. Jerry floated beside them, his humming soft and steady like a lullaby. "What just happened?" Jax whispered. His chitin was pale with fear, but his eyes were wide with something else. Something that looked almost like wonder. Threll didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about what Elena had said earlier, about humans and their impossible habit of befriending things that should have killed them. She was thinking about the photograph of the grandmother and the dog. She was thinking about the duct tape on the hull, and the engineer who had heard a pressure leak through vacuum, and the dying child who had named God. She was thinking about the shadow thing, which had been a cosmic predator 5 minutes ago, and was now asking, in a voice like distant thunder, what a blanket was for. "We were wrong," she said finally. "About everything." Jax tilted his head stalks. "Ambassador, we thought humans were weak because they had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. We thought they were primitive because their ships were held together with tape, and their technology was 1,000 years behind ours. We thought they were strange because they laughed and cried and told stories about things that didn't exist." She turned away from the viewport. Her 6 eyes were wet, a phenomenon that had never happened before, not once in her entire life. But we were wrong. Humans are not weak. They're the strongest species in the galaxy. Not because they can fight, not because they can build, but because they can love. They can look at something terrifying and broken and alone, and they can choose to care for it. They can give it a name. They can make it part of their family. She looked down at her own hands, chitinous, clawed, designed by evolution for grasping and tearing. She had never touched another being with gentleness. She had never been taught how. "That is what we should fear," she said. "Not their violence, their compassion. Because a species that can befriend the darkness itself is a species that cannot be defeated. Not by war, not by diplomacy, not by anything we understand." The airlock cycled. The inner door opened, and Elena Vasquez walked onto the observation deck, her pressure suit in tatters, her face streaked with frost and exhaustion. Behind her came Jerry, humming softly. And behind Jerry came the shadow thing, which was trying very hard to be solid, and failing in ways that were almost endearing. "Ambassador," Elena said, "I'd like you to meet someone. We haven't decided on a name yet. We're thinking maybe Spot." Threll stared at her. Then, slowly, her mouth cracked open, not in confusion this time, but in something that felt almost like a smile. "Spot," she repeated. "Yeah, like the dog in the old cartoon. You probably don't have those." "We don't," Threll agreed. She paused. "But I would like to learn." Elena grinned. It was tired and lopsided and utterly, terrifyingly human. "Welcome to the family," she said. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Council of 7 Species began to rewrite every file they had on humanity. They replaced the words primitive and dangerous and unpredictable with a single phrase written in the trembling hand of an ambassador who had just learned what it felt like to be seen. "Do not provoke. Do not threaten. Do not underestimate. They will befriend anything. And once they befriend it, it will never let you go."